Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Shikamaru Hiden, A Cloud Drifting in the Silent Dark. The Land of Silence, Chapter 3. The square in front of Fushu Castle was jammed. Shikamaru could easily believe every person in the village was in attendance. And not just revolutionaries in their long black coats. Young, old, man, woman, people of all different classes, no distinction made between rich and poor, gathered in the plaza and waited impatiently, eager for the leading man to appear, faces all similarly lit up with passion, eyes all sparkling. They were in high spirits. The people chatting nearby were loud enough to warrant a grumpy look. Under his long coat, Shikamaru felt his skin dampen with sweat, possibly because of the heat radiating from the people in the square. Ro was next to him. If all had gone well, Soku was hiding in a concrete building in a corner of the plaza. Ro's jutsu had transformed Shikamaru's own chakra into that of the coat's owner, a perfect copy in quality, amount, and every other detail. Similarly, Ro was cloaked in the chakra of his own coat's owner. They both wore disguises, again thanks to Ro's skills. No matter how good a physical disguise was, an enemy could see through it quickly enough if they took a moment to closely examine the nature of the chakra hidden underneath. But Ro's jutsu took this sort of uncertainty out of the equation. A disguised chakra was difficult to take a closer look at. On top of that, they had this crowd. There was no way anyone there could see that Shikamaru and Ro were enemies of the revolution. For the time being, let us draw near that location, Ro said, voice hushed. He turned his eyes on the bare bones of a stage, nothing but a framework and wooden stairs to step up onto it, with nothing on top of it. There weren't even any guards, despite the fact that the crowd jostled so close they could reach out and touch the base of the structure. Do you believe that Django will truly come? Ro asked doubtfully. And with good reason. It was simply too dangerous for the leader of an entire nation to stand unprotected on stage. Especially a stage like this one, which seemed to boast that no one involved in its construction had given any credence to the idea that someone might target their leader's life. We'll get close and wait, anyway. If it's not Django, we can quietly sit it out. Understood, sir. They just had to get within range of his suffocating darkness technique. Once he sealed off Django's movement, Soku's chakra would strike the final blow. It appears that he has arrived. Before Ro had even finished muttering this sentence, an enormous cheer rose up from the crowd near the stage. This rough wave spread in the blink of an eye throughout the plaza and enveloped Shikamaru. In the midst of a storm of voices so loud it threatened to rupture his eardrums, he pushed his way through the crowd toward the raised platform. Finally, a single man appeared on it. His jet-black coat was the same design as the revolutionaries, but the silver-worked fasteners were much more elaborate. A pattern of countless snakes was embroidered on the sleeves in silver thread. The man's hair was a rich indigo blue, his physique manly, jaw jutting out slightly, nose straight and sharp. The eyes that calmly looked down on the crowd housed a cool intelligence, and a slight beard grew on his chin. He was perhaps in his mid-30s. I would assume that is Django, Ro muttered, without stopping. Shikamaru kept pushing forward without responding. In his heart, however, he felt fairly certain the man before his eyes was Django. The man on the stage slowly raised his right arm. Instantly, the boisterous cheering stopped. As if satisfied with this, the corners of the man's mouth turned up slightly as he closed his eyes. He opened them again after a deep breath and began to speak with a cool composure. First, I thank everyone who has come together here. His voice was deep and heavy, and yet refreshingly clear, with a mysterious quality, as though it were seeping in through the listener's entire body rather than through their ears. Shikamaru felt an indescribable itch, like the man's voice was caressing his heart. It seemed that Ro felt the same sensation. He glanced in Shikamaru's direction as he walked. But Shikamaru didn't meet his eyes as he quietly moved forward. The man bowed lightly and began to speak once more. Already 10 years since I rose up in this land. Now, many like-minded souls have come together around me, and this land of ours has begun to flourish. However, not a single one of our hopes has yet been realized, not one of our wishes fulfilled. The crowd listened in silence. When the man on stage broke off, an abnormal stillness rose up. With just a few words, the plaza had fallen completely under this man's sway. "I want to ask all the citizens in the land of silence," the man said, suddenly fierce, with no trace of his previous calm. He threw his arms out to both sides as he let forth this cry from his soul. "This land under the rule of the daimyo, and this land now, which is the better world to live in. Lord Jingu!" The citizens raised their voices as one, enormous, loud, full of approval for the man on stage. "It appears that we are not in error." "That man is indeed Jingo," Rose said. Shikamaru nodded and stepped toward the platform. A few more meters would bring his target within range of his suffocating darkness. All he had to do then was quickly restrain Jingo when a suitable moment came along. One chance. Jingo raised his right hand high. The citizens fell silent. "You have shown me only too well how you feel. The power and knowledge of the daimyo pales in comparison with our own. We of ninja birth, and that dark era when we were once ruled by daimyo is over. Citizens, you are safe. Will we revolutionaries not offer you eternal protection with this power and with our very lives? Citizens, you must merely push forward undaunted and live in a sincere way. That is what we revolutionaries truly desire." The crowd was drunk on his words. Some people were even shedding tears. It was a truly bizarre spectacle. Shikamaru was pretty sure that the speech so far did not warrant this kind of reaction. Never mind that they had only heard the introduction, Shikamaru wasn't convinced that Jingo's oratory was actually all that good. But he had to at least admit that there was a strange power in the man's voice, a power that made itself felt by means other than the content of the speech. The land of silence is in the borderlands of the continent. The history of this nation is a history of persecution by other nations. Our ancestors did not close this land off to sever ties with others. They did it to protect us. Our nation was so weak and small that we had no choice but to close our doors to the outside world. But all that is over now. The pressure in Jingo's voice gradually grew. The ones who can heal this world are not the daimyo, but us. We who hold the power of the ninja. The power of the ninja is the true justice. This alone will bring about peace for all people. It is the true nature of the world that those who excel, those who possess real power, should rule over those who do not. We have no need of daimyo or others like them who would place ninja and citizens below themselves, living solely for their own desires. Look at this nation. 10 years since we exterminated the daimyo, and our land prospers like never before. Jingo thrust his chest out. Soon, Shikamaru announced to row beside him. In a few steps, they would be within range. "I will exterminate the daimyo from this world, and we will build a new world." Why must ninja be discriminated against? Because we have powers superior to the daimyo. Is it not because we bear powers that exceed those of mere mortals? But why must those with superior powers be persecuted? Should not excellence be championed? Even an average citizen can pull themselves upward by excelling in some way or another. It is precisely because the daimyo and their ilk fear the arrival of such a world that they discriminate against the ninja, segregate us, keep us under their thumbs. Ninja and citizens alike are victims of the desires of the daimyo. Pressing in close, Shikamaru thought he saw blue flames flash up in Jingo's eyes. A revolution, just one more step, and they'd be in range. Judging from the wild enthusiasm of the people, the man before his eyes was in all likelihood Jingo himself, and Shikamaru was surprised at how smoothly they'd been able to get so close. He considered the possibility that it was a trap. But he couldn't believe that Jingo had detected them. And he couldn't even consider letting this opportunity get away. Akatsuki came forward to build a new world. But they were destroyed by ninja. They were destroyed by ninja locked in the old ways, content with their lot, content with discrimination, content to be controlled. And Akatsuki, after all, Akatsuki. They were nothing more than a portent of the dazzling morning. Hear me, people of the land of silence awaiting the dawn. Django spread his arms coolly, almost as if he were ready to welcome a god from the heavens. The sunlight of a new era shines on the land of silence. The people cheered, drowning out all other sound. The perfect chance. Shikamaru released his shadow toward the stage. Two black snakes slithered through the framework and raced toward Django's feet. The moment the snake's fangs latched onto his feet, Django would be unable to move, and he would lose his life to Soku's chakra. Until then, he could get as drunk as he wanted on his own words. The snakes were at Django's feet. But they didn't latch on. Wah! He was sure he was within range. And yet his shadow did not extend forward. Little mice there. Django shot an icy gaze at Shikamaru. We are detected. Rose shouted. Several shadows flew up from behind Django. The darting darkness bent over Ro, pinning him down. NGH. Once more, Shikamaru urged his shadow toward Django. It's pointless, Django said, sounding callous. Shikamaru's shadow would not obey him anymore. The shadow that he had, until that moment, been able to move like one of his own limbs, lost its target, a kite with a string cut, and squirmed and spun on the ground. In which case, Shikamaru flew up onto the stage. If the plan was ruined, all that was left was direct physical combat. Django didn't flinch, a thin smile playing on his lips, despite the blade closing in on him. Shikamaru pulled out the kunai at his waist, set his sights on the other man's throat, and swung. The instant the tips of his toes touched the platform, someone kicked Shikamaru from the side. The impact sent him tumbling along the stage before he could pull himself back up to ready his kunai, braced on one knee. Why you're, a man blocked the path between Django and Shikamaru. He looked sick, face pale, eyes too cloudy for Shikamaru to read, mouth pulled into a straight line, an expression of his honest nature. No mistake, it was him. What are you doing? Shikamaru called the man by name. Sai. The Land of Silence, Chapter 4. The brush in Sai's hand was dancing. No matter how many times Shikamaru saw a tiger appear as the tip of that brush raced along the scroll in Sai's opposite hand, he was caught off guard. He tumbled off the stage and into the midst of the enemy. He didn't have time to concern himself with Sai at that moment. His mind was reeling. Why wasn't his jutsu working? How had his cover been blown? Was Soku all right? Dodging enemy attacks, he turned toward Django once more. In the corner of his eye, he saw Ro, a dozen or more revolutionaries bearing down on and trying to pin him. The Umbu member struggled fiercely, but with that many men on top of him, resistance was all but impossible. The claws of the tiger Sai had drawn ripped into Shikamaru's cheek. The plastic skin of his disguise peeled away limply. I'll get that mask off and have you feeling better in no time, okay? Sai said, an innocent smile rising to his lips. His hand didn't stop. Several more tigers surrounded Shikamaru. Why are you, this whole time, you've been talking like you know me? There was no way Shikamaru could tell Sai who he was. His enemy might capture him and discover his true identity, but he could never give it up himself. It was an ironclad shinobi rule. Beyond the swarm of revolutionaries, he could see the stage, and Django on it, composed, arms crossed, looking down on Shikamaru's desperate resistance. I have to get back there. Just one more time. He launched a kunai into the air to strike the heads of the ink tigers and flew after them. Behind him, the tigers dissolved into a spray of black ink. He hit the ground running. An overwhelming number of enemies lay before him. Can you make it? Shikamaru asked himself as he wove signs with both hands. Countless shadows stretched out in all directions from his feet. It was the art of shadow stitching, a jutsu to pierce an opponent with a shadow transformed into a needle. He could produce an infinite number of needles, which made the technique perfect for taking on a large number of enemies. He decided to aim for the tigers and the enemies around him. His shadows spread out in a fan formation, and after he sent up a silent prayer, they wriggled up out of the ground all at once and shot toward the enemy. "Go!" Shikamaru shouted, a battle cry. The shadows abruptly bent up into sickles. Enough of this futile struggle. Django's voice slammed into Shikamaru from the stage. At that moment, the shadows hurtling forward lost all momentum and slithered back to his feet. What did you do?" he asked Django, with barely contained rage. How can his voice reach this far? Who is this guy? Huh? I know that jutsu. Before he knew it, Sai was standing in front of him, blocking the way. Is that you, Shikamaru? Sai, it's painful to watch this pointless squirming. Sai made his brush dance even more vigorously, and an enormous white and black tiger, larger than any of the others, pulled itself up from the scroll. You'll understand too, soon enough. Sai thrust the hand clenching his brush toward Shikamaru, and taking that as its cue, the enormous tiger attacked, massive front paws high in the air. Bastard, readying himself, Shikamaru sent kunai flying at the tiger. As he was about to leap into the air once more, something grabbed onto his right foot. And then, his left foot was caught. The revolutionaries. Robbed of his momentum, his face slammed into the ground, followed by several enemies throwing themselves on top of him. Someone as smart and capable as you not being able to see that the tiger was a diversion, you must be really confused. Sai looked down on Shikamaru under a pile of the enemy, barely able to breathe. Shikamaru saw a human figure behind Sai, slowly approaching. Django! Take off the mask, Django ordered the revolutionaries on Shikamaru's back. A finger was jammed into the tear on Shikamaru's cheek, and the entire layer of fake skin was peeled back. Well, look, it is Shikamaru, after all, Sai said. So this is the genius of Konoha, Nara Shikamaru, Django said, sounding excited, as if he had found something he'd been looking for. His light blue eyes, shining suspiciously, caught hold of Shikamaru and didn't let go. Smile on his lips, Shikamaru opened his mouth. If you don't finish me off right here and now, things will get scary later. It's fine. You will live with me, Django said confidently, as a fist hit Shikamaru's neck and he lost consciousness. Infinity, the darkness was total, so complete he couldn't even see his hand in front of his face. Shikamaru intently tried to focus his mind, his thoughts. He had no idea how many days had passed, but judging from the number of meals that had been brought to him and the state of his stomach, he suspected it had been 5 or more already. How had this happened? No matter how many times he tried to answer this question, he couldn't get a handle on the big picture. The problem had occurred before Sai showed up. Shikamaru had gone up to the side of the stage where Django was standing and sent his shadow out. However, his shadow hadn't been able to reach Django's feet, it had somehow lost its way. And then Django had noticed Shikamaru and Ro. He had called the two of them mice. This, despite the fact that they had completely transformed their chakra. The man had easily fended off their jutsu, almost as if there had been a barrier around him that rendered ninja techniques ineffective. But could Django really sap the power of jutsu? Shikamaru didn't know. But he was certain that some kind of effect had jammed both his own jutsu and Ro's. His shadow hadn't made it to Django. And when he had tried to release his shadow stitching on Sai's beasts, his shadow abruptly lost all power. The obvious explanation was that in both instances, Django or some effect around him dampened the power of Shikamaru's jutsu. In all likelihood, Ro's jutsu had also lost power or been weakened, which caused Shikamaru's own chakra to mix in with that of the person he was disguising himself as and become a different chakra. It made sense that this had caught Django's attention. Jutsu doesn't work on him. Why? There was no way that, in the brief time within which all this took place, Shikamaru could have collected exactly the information he needed to comprehend the true nature of Django's power. Given that he had mere scraps to scrutinize, he couldn't even come up with a guess. This irritated Shikamaru, and made him impatient. NGH. Nga. He could hear Ro groaning and suffering somewhere. A while ago, he had heard Soko struggling. Apparently, they were both being held nearby. Maybe they were being tortured and beaten. The voices he heard were always groans. But for some reason, he himself wasn't being tortured. Sorry. He threw the word toward the groaning Ro, even though there was no way the other man would hear it. This was the result of his own hasty actions. Maybe he should have investigated Django more thoroughly before attempting to carry out his plan? That couldn't have been the only chance they would have had. He hit the cold stone floor. Over and over and over. Are you alive? A voice came out of the darkness. Django. Are you dead? Django said, apparently concerned that no answer came back to him. But he had to have been aware that Shikamaru's chakra was intact. It was just sarcasm. He knew full well Shikamaru wasn't dead. Seems that you're eating well. Shikamaru ate everything he was offered, after checking that it wasn't poisoned. Training to detect poison with a single lick was the most basic of basics for the shinobi. You couldn't quit eating. As long as you were alive, an opportunity would present itself, a moment when you moved or you died with a path left untaken. A ninja never gave up on life. A true ninja survived and executed their mission no matter what. Enduring and persevering, that was a ninja. Which was why Shikamaru believed in Ro and Soko still. Now that you've spent a few days shrouded in darkness, perhaps you're in the mood to be good and hear what I have to say. I hate to tell you, but darkness and shadows are my friends. Interesting fellow, Django said, and laughed. I'll come again. His aura disappeared. Gah! Ro's cries began anew. End of chapters 3 and 4. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.